The Philadelphia Eagles, we talked about the Carolina Panthers and the Minnesota Vikings. Is the NFC up for grabs? I think you would agree that, LaVar, the Eagles are the team clearly that have separated themselves from everybody else at this point.
Correct.
Based on last year.
In NFC, yeah.
And all Philadelphia did was just improve.
Yes.
Like, that's basically what they did. And that also involved drafting every player that's been a part of the Georgia Bulldog program
championship run.
over the past couple of years.
Not their best players from their championship runs.
Yes.
Yeah, their best defensive players. And now they've added Swift, so now they've taken it to the offensive side of the ball as well.
Stud after stud.
I mean, if you're going to win championships in college, I mean, those players are the best of the best.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And so when you see just sort of where Philadelphia is headed, it all goes back to the quarterback who signed an extension this offseason, Jalen Hurts. And his head coach, Nick Sirianni, talked about Hurts as his starter. Take a listen.
Jalen may be the most coachable person I've ever been around in my life. And that, I mean, he's just always looking to get better. And now that's our job as coaches, to make sure we're feeding him good information. He's so coachable. Like, he just keeps getting, and he just keeps getting better, and he keeps getting better, and he keeps getting better. And so I see another jump in everything that he's done, with the accuracy, with the decision making. But I do see, his development continuing, and that's why we talk about with Jalen all the time. I don't know what his ceiling is, because he just keeps getting better, and he's going to continue to do that. And so I've seen that same jump, just the decision, the speed in which he makes his decision, his accuracy of his throws. He's really had a good spring.
It doesn't shock me that that's what you hear about Jalen Hurts, considering if you go back to when he was in college, I don't know how many quarterbacks could have handled this, where in the biggest game of the year against Georgia, as a starting quarterback in Alabama, after already having a ton of success.
After already having won a national title.
They remove you from a national championship game, put in a freshman
and you're done.
Who leads them back to victory.
And you're done.
And
like, you're not coming back as the starting quarterback for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and to see the way he handled that, and then he comes back the next year, and when Tua gets hurt in the semifinal game, Jalen Hurts comes in, kept his mouth shut all year, was nothing but supportive, backed Tua the entire time, and then when he got his opportunity, balled out. They won that game. And then he goes on to Oklahoma, becomes a better quarterback under Lincoln Riley.
Almost. If they hadn't fell off, he could have got the Heisman that year.
Which would have been another quarterback for Lincoln Riley getting the Heisman. And then he gets to Philadelphia. He's a second-round pick. He's got to deal with all the Carson Wentz fallout, the final game of the regular season, Doug Peterson. Everybody tells him this is a team that's rebuilding. He's a stopgap quarterback, much like Nick Sirianni's a stopgap coach. And yet here he is, an MVP candidate. If he didn't get hurt last year, I think he's the MVP of the league last year. They nearly won a Super Bowl. He was the best player on the field, Mahomes included. Like, this shouldn't be all that surprising, considering how he handled that moment in that game with Tua as his backup and getting benched. And there's a lot of guys who would have melted down. That's an embarrassing moment on the biggest stage, and he wore it and became a better player afterwards because of it.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts has always shown a level of maturity and enlightenment that has been commendable, even admirable at times. He's overcome a lot of adverse situations. And he's shown that his character is very, very solid. The one thing about Jalen Hurts that ultimately starts to really kind of jump out at you as of late is that he is a person that is showing the ability to understand what's taking place, in front of him. A lot of people were left after that game, like, man, what if Jalen Hurts gets that ball back? What if he's able to have that final drive?
Right.
That could have been a very, very different storyline that's playing out for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a very, very sympathetic figure, but he's also someone that people have built a lot of trust in after that Super Bowl.
Because think about it, and sorry to interrupt, but now that you bring that up, in a game where Patrick Mahomes is the starting quarterback for the Chiefs, Jalen Hurts was the scariest player on the field.
He was clearly outplaying.
Don't let him have the ball back.
Yeah.
Like, has that ever happened with Patrick Mahomes in his career, other than Brady in the AFC title game, because their defense was falling apart? Like, scariest player on the field in the biggest game was Jalen Hurts.
He was doing them. He was cooking out there, and they just ran out of time. I mean, it didn't fall on him as the reason why Philly lost that game, but they were competitive in a game against a team that you would have thought the Super Bowl game was the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, that's your Super Bowl. So everybody's sitting there thinking that it's all but over, but I mean, Philadelphia showed that they could be competitive, and also ultimately, if Jalen Hurts gets that ball back, I don't think that there were very many people that didn't think that Jalen Hurts would be able to rally that team and get them downfield to be in position to at least, you know, take it into overtime. I believe he was in position because they only needed 3 points to.
I believe so. Yeah, if I remember
before
correctly.
That penalty took place, if they get the ball back, they only need 3 points to send it into overtime, if I recall it correctly. So, you know, when you look at Jalen Hurts and the amount of belief that Nick Sirianni is placing in him, I ultimately say the best coaches are the coaches that can convince and prove to their players that they actually care about them, because most players don't think that coaches care about them. It's like they have a job to do, I have a job to do, that's our relationship, I'm going to do my job the best, you know, however that person interprets what the best way of doing their job is. But when you have a coach that speaks glowingly of you and shows support for you and just says things in a way where you know that there's a true belief and a true respect and admiration for your players, you know, they respond. Guys respond to that, and it just seems like it's like it seems like it's a foreign type of way of communicating. But like I said earlier, with the way these athletes are now, that seems to be becoming the norm, where coaches are working hard as hell to try to build a rapport and a bond, you know, create a bond with their players these days. That wasn't always the case. You know, these were authoritative figures. So it's like, you know, if you do it, that a boy. If you don't, you get mother effed. Like, and you get effed all over the place and told what you are and told what you ain't and told all kinds of different things outside of your name. And that's the way some of these coaches communicated. And the way they did things was a lot through threatening and negative reinforcement, and you were left to make sense of it the best way that you could. You know, these days, you know, it seems a little different, but nonetheless, you still find it very rare when a coach can actually connect with the players in a way where you see that response, and the belief that's connected to the belief that coach has in those players. And I think you're seeing that play out in Philadelphia right now with Nick Sirianni, and I think that's why they have kind of evolved the way that they did. And maybe Jalen Hurts doesn't develop into the quarterback that he's developing into under all of the things that he had to go through if Nick Sirianni doesn't take over that team.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting just to see the track and the path that he took, because he came from Nick Saban, then he ended up with Lincoln Riley. Now Doug Peterson was there when he first got there. Now he's got Nick Sirianni. Like there's like a lot of coaches who have had different levels of success, and he just sort of picked from everybody.
I mean, think about where things were really kind of. Do we know where things were heading if Doug Peterson maintains control of that team?
No.
Like, he loses his job in essence because he was trying to figure out possibly, what do I have in my quarterback situation?
And the Carson Wentz stuff was weird. It felt like they were ready to move on, but that whole thing was kind of strange the way it happened.
It definitely didn't seem as though they were all the way bought in. The Doug Peterson group was not all the way bought into Jalen Hurts. Like, almost as though, like, we're looking to possibly go in a different direction, and we need to see. Why else would you not play him? It just made no sense the way that went down and the way it unfolded. Like, and that man lost his job based off of that. So you mess around, you lose your job because you're playing around with playing time, and it's impacting other teams' seasons. You're like looking at this as like, here's your audition, like you're auditioning for us, instead of keeping Jalen Hurts in and seeing what he could do and finishing out the season on a high note. Like, you wouldn't do that to somebody that you respect as a starter. There's not a coach in the league that would do that to a player that they respect as a true starter. So this was maybe not going to end well for Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia, depending on all the decisions that had to take place.
And I think the thought was, when they moved on from Carson Wentz and the way they viewed Jalen Hurts, it was like, well, he's a second-round pick, and again, more of a stopgap. Like, Howie Roseman didn't like the term rebuild. Like, he would get very upset whenever anybody said, well, you guys are rebuilding because Doug Peterson's gone and Carson Wentz is gone, and you guys, it's a new era of Philly football. And he would get upset, and he was 100% correct, because they knew, and I think, or they had a feeling what they had in Jalen Hurts. Like, I think they were optimistic, but I don't know that they knew that they had this. And Sirianni, to his credit, figured out whatever buttons to push. And Jalen Hurts went from second rounder, getting benched. I think it was Nate Sudfeld was brought in the final game of the season, and that, Philly was accused of tanking and everything that came along with it. And now he's one of the likely MVP candidates.
He's a premier quarterback in the league.
You know what's crazy about that game where he got benched in the national championship game? That was January 2018. If I would have told you in that moment, while he's sitting on the sideline seeing a freshman come in the game and save his team because he was playing poorly, if I were to tell you, hey, 5 years from now, he's going to outplay Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl.
While your counterpart is talking about taking jiu-jitsu to learn how to get his ass flung onto the ground.
As his coach hits a vape pen trying to explain it. It's wild, man, just to see the path.
Very, very different. very different career paths that those guys are on now.
That's a crazy 5-year stretch for somebody, man.
One guy was out playing Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl while the other one is sitting at home trying to figure out what's his name.
Like, hey, how do you do the Darce choke again? I want to make sure I know. I want to make sure I know.
Do you
up to speed on this?
Do you have to let the ball go before you're able to leverage the body to be able to hit the ground the way that you need to hit the ground? So you don't. I don't get it. I think it's a bunch of BS, if you ask me. Like, there's no way you can do something that's going to prepare you to be able to fall down differently.
Right.
It's just that still has kind of, to me, it has snuck by a lot of people's kind of, analysis and breakdown. But let's be clear, the way in which we saw Tagovailoa getting knocked the hell out is not there's nothing that can break that fall. There's no disciplines of martial arts. There's no helmet that can stop that from happening. There's nothing that can stop what happened to him from happening if a defender gets a hold of him the way that they did.